welcome back to the Wine Marketing Podcast. I'm your host, Heather Danitz, and today I am joined by Jason Haas, who is the partner and general manager of Tablas Creek Vineyard in Paso Robles, California. Hi, Jason.
Hi, Heather. Thanks for the
How are you
invitation.
doing? Thank you so much.
Doing
So
great.
I'm so glad to have you here. I've talked a lot on this podcast and just kind of like in general on my social media and everything about how much I admire you and Ian and everything that you guys are doing with the marketing at Tablas Creek. I mean, I feel like you guys are the gold standard of DTC marketing and community building in wine. So I'm so excited to have you here to kind of dive into that a bit.
Well, thank you.
So I did talk to Ian on the previous iteration of this podcast back in 2021, Ian Consoli, who's the your director of marketing. And we talked a little bit about everything, but we also talked a lot about why company culture matters. And I think that that's like a really something that I notice a lot when being a third party that comes into a winery setting, I can tell right away if people actually like working with each other. And it's so clear that you guys love working with each other, that you have a lot of fun with that. And so, I just, again, I feel like I'm just word vomiting all of the things that I love about Tablas Creek. So,
Well, one of the things that we inherit really from my dad is, and it's true really in every business that he started, is that he figured out a way that people could make a real career in the businesses that he started. So
mhm.
the like super long tenure at places is something that from the import company that he built to his short stint as a wholesaler, like even then, like there's people in that company who are still there 40 years after he was working there. And then at Tablas Creek, we've got a lot of people who've been here, like I've been here 23 years, and we have a lot of people who've been here longer than I have. I think building a place where people, first of all, feel inspired to contribute to what the goal and mission is of the company, but also within which they feel like they have the ability to grow and to advance their own careers is such an important piece of it. You need both, I think.
Yeah, I agree 100%. I mean, having long tenure, inspiring people to be involved in all aspects of the business is really just takes things to the next level. Because I know some wineries and some companies in general that they've had folks that have worked with the company for a really long time, but they're still so disconnected from like each other departments that are not their own department. And it's clear that when all of those things come together, it just works so much better. So that's another thing I just really admire about you guys. I feel like you really have buy-in from everyone on your staff.
It's something that I feel like maybe happens more normally when you're little, and you have to be more conscious about building as you grow. It's been one of my main focuses over the last decade is as we've gotten a little bigger and a little more specialized, we actually have a marketing department. We didn't have that 10 years ago.
Yeah.
And as people get sort of head down in their own projects, just taking the opportunities to remind everyone what the big picture is and why we're all on the same team, and creating the opportunities that happen organically in a small company to share what you're working on and share your excitement and share the things that like maybe you don't know how to address, and realize
Yeah.
that everybody else on the team, like even if that's not their specific area of focus, chances are pretty good that they'll have thought about it at some point and have some suggestions that are useful. So it doesn't just happen, and it's something that I feel like we've recognized that we've had to work on, and we've worked on.
Well, I appreciate that about you guys because I feel like you're always continuing to innovate, and from the virtual tastings and the Instagram lives that we're going to get into a little bit later, but then also the boxed wine and the wine club share program that you guys have become a part of. It's really, I really appreciate that you're always bringing those ideas in and being receptive to that, and also fostering a culture where that's possible and intentionally fostering that culture.
I think it's important to remind people that there is always something next to do. You can't just do what you've always done and try to do it a little bit better, though I am a huge believer in that. I'm a believer in the power of like incremental improvements. But still, that's one of the things that I mean, I'm fortunate for the great people we have in charge of the different departments that they do feel that they still have room to innovate. And I feel like a lot of my job is to make sure that they know that that is not just permitted, but encouraged and will be supported because there is always something new.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, I think that kind of leads us pretty well into our couple of the questions that I have for you here. So I find that a lot of wineries they're really focused on kind of like immediate sales or short-term tactics. But I feel like Tablas Creek does a really, really good job of being patient. And as I said earlier, very intentional about how you're marketing and innovating with Tablas Creek. Where does that come from? And how do you kind of balance that long-term vision with like the short-term needs?
I'm really stubborn. It's one of the things that I know about myself, and I have to work on is that I I am not very good at saying, okay, I am no longer willing to do that. And so it does mean that I have to make sure that I am careful about the things that I start because I don't just do something a couple of times and then be like, that didn't work. I
Yeah.
probably should be better at that. But I do think that in a lot of cases, those goals are not in conflict with one another. It just may take a while for some of the longer term things to show up in the results. Like one of the great examples I have of that is the blog that I started back in 2007. So it's been almost 20 years. And I remember it was like a year in and I had gotten, I think, 2 comments on posting a blog every week. The reason that I started it was I had had a conversation with Mark Perrin, one of the members of the Perrin family who we are partners with in Tablas Creek, and they had done a blog for Femi Perrin back starting in '04 or '05. And
Wow.
he said, you should try a blog. It'll be great for your search engine positioning. And I'm like, okay, that
Sure.
sounds like it makes sense. Why not? We'll try it. But it turned out that I found real value in sharing the things that I was excited about, sharing the things that maybe were keeping me up at night, sharing the things that I thought that people deserve to know. And so just the writing process was valuable. And I'm not sure that I could have told you at the beginning what the marketing goal was of doing this, other than the search engine piece. But it
Yeah.
turned out that one of the audiences that are interested in writing about wine are other writers. And so it ended up helping me build these connections to other members of the wine writing community. So that was, again, not anticipated, but it turned out to be the first real value of it. And gradually we built it up into things that are valuable to other wineries, things that are valuable to other wine lovers. And then once social media came about, all of a sudden, like the demand for content became so great that
Mhm.
all of a sudden it was very clear what value the blog brought. But again, it was something that I was doing because it was of interest and of value to me personally. And I figured that in the long run, we would figure out how to make it valuable to the business. And I
Yeah.
think there's lots of things like that where if it's something that somebody cares about, it's something that someone is excited about, I'm happy to have them dive in and we'll figure out how to make it useful later. But I feel like those are sort of separate things and neither in conflict with, not in conflict with at least, the shorter term goals of marketing and sales. Obviously, you have to have promotions or things that bring attention to the wines you need to sell. You have to have I'm a huge proponent of posting something every day on our social media feeds because it's mind share that you're competing for. Those things have to happen, but it's not like they have to happen to the exclusion of of these longer term projects like the blog, like video projects, like any of the other bigger things that we've dived in.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, I love your blog. And this is coming from somebody who also enjoys blogging. And it's exactly what you said. It's like the things that are keeping me up at night, the things that are just running in the back of my head when I'm out with my clients or like just out in the world experiencing marketing from other companies as a consumer. I'm just constantly, I have like all this stuff in my head and it's a means for me to get it out. And And, and of course, the benefit of the SEO and all of that. I'm wondering with the blog specifically, what, as you said, it's the things that are keeping you up, but it's also what are other things that help you decide what goes on the blog?
There are some things that happen every year. That's one of the nice things about being a part of a business that's on an annual cycle. There are things there every year you have bud break, every year you have veraison, every year we do blending. So probably we try to post every week, and of those 50-ish posts a year, probably 30 are some variation of something that happens every year. Obviously, every year is different, and in many ways, it's the opportunity to contrast what's happening this year with what may have happened last year or previous years that gives a particular post its relevance. Like, you can't write the same thing. Here's what veraison is. Like, you can't just write that every year. It's boring. But you can talk about how veraison introduce people to what veraison is, and then talk about how veraison this year compares with veraison in previous years, what got us there, what that means. There is an annual cycle piece. We also try to do these series, and this is something that I think is important in social media also. You don't want to have to come up with a new idea every time.
Yeah.
So one of the things that we do is we've figured out ways to work through our library of older wines. So at the beginning of every year, we do a horizontal tasting. So a tasting of every wine that we made 10 vintages ago. And then I write that up on the blog, and that becomes the starting point for a public tasting that we do in February. Every summer, we do a vertical tasting. So pick one wine and do every vintage that we made of that one wine, and then write that up on the blog. And then that becomes the beginnings for a public event that we do for our wine club members and their guests. So that's not the same piece, but it's the same idea. Every year we have a wine club shipment in the spring and a wine club shipment in the fall. Like, we do all of the tasting notes for that. That becomes a blog piece. So again, there are cyclical things that mean we don't have to come up with ideas every time. But I think those, and then there are the periodic show people what's going on in the vineyard. Like, it's so visually appealing. Like, how do we bring people into that world? So that happens probably, maybe not quite once a month, but every 6 weeks or so throughout the year. And so that leaves maybe a dozen posts where I try to do a deep dive into something that I haven't talked about before. And sometimes that comes out of panels that I'm asked to speak on. Sometimes that comes out of news of what's going on in the world of wine or in the world of wine business. Sometimes it's an article that I've read that just seems like it demands a response. So I find that those are the ones that are the most valuable over time. They may not be the ones that are the most relevant to our marketing in the short term, but they're the ones that I go back to and that I find often lead later to invitations to speak in other places or the most engagement on some of the more business related forums, the LinkedIn's and some of the other wine business sorts of forums. So those are the ones that take the most time, but they're also the ones that end up, I think, having the longest lifespan and being the most valuable.
Yeah. Yeah, I agree. I've noticed that too when again, I keep saying this, but like the things that keep me up at night, the things that I need to respond to because of something I read or something I experienced or whatever, those are the articles that I've written on my Substack that just perform the best. They get the most comments, they get the most shares from people. I get like a ton of emails too, responding to them, which is always really fun to get that. So yeah, I agree. I think those are also, I think, maybe the most fun for people to read because it's sort of like a peek inside your brain. A lot of people will talk about the seasonal things that are going on and there's only so much. And that's like a whole other question that we could get into is like, how do you take these cyclical things, feel like if I write another post about bud break, I'm going to lose my mind, It's like, how do you take those things that are different or those that are the same and make them different every single year? So I find that the ones that are sort of like spur of the moment, almost like reactive, tend to be the most fun for me to write and then the most fun for people to read. Are you experiencing that as well?
It's interesting. I did a blog I think when I got to the 1,000th blog post that we had put up, that seemed like a milestone worth celebrating. So I did a kind of a dozen highlights from 1,000 blog post last year. I almost all of the ones that I picked were ones like you described and like we just talked about. They're the ones that were these thought pieces that were in response to something important going on in the world or in the world of wine. And those are the ones that stick with me. And looking at the comments that I got on that post, there were a number of comments that were along the lines of, yeah, these are great, but the ones that I really look forward to are these beautiful pictures of your vineyard and what's going on in your world. So I think they're valuable in different ways to different
Yeah.
audiences. And the variety is one of the things that's important. And what's one of the other things that I've learned is that like it takes a while to find your voice when you're blogging. It took a while to realize, yes, it needs to be first person, of course. It has to feel like you are talking directly to someone. And it takes a while for a voice, for you to figure out what that voice is. It took me about 1.5 years, I felt, before it was
Yeah.
comfortable. More and more, we've also incorporated other people's voices in the blog, other Tablas Creek people. I think we've had at this point, more than 10 people who have contributed at least one blog, and a number of whom have done a series, starting with my dad, of course, but not just. And everybody's voice is going to be a little bit different. And in a blog, that's great, because one of the values that a blog does, I think this is one of the values that social media can have done right also, is that it personalizes a business. It puts a personal face that people can relate to, because people don't relate to companies. I don't think. It's sure you can have a specific ethos, you can have a specific look and feel, but still people relate to other people. And having that voice, having the opportunity to communicate that voice is like what a privilege that we've actually developed an audience that wants to read my thoughts on all of these things, and our thoughts on all of these things. I don't know that answered your question exactly, but I think that different sorts of posts have different sorts of value to different sorts of people, and the audience for wine is very heterogeneous. It's not a single audience member. They're different ages. They come from different aspects of the industry. I know I have writers who are looking for something different than consumers who are looking for something
Yeah.
different than people who work at other wineries, and trying to make sure that we have a variety of different posts and even a variety of different voices from Tablas Creek who have the opportunity to contribute to that feels like it's going to make it more valuable.
I find that even though it sounds like, you're kind of talking to a few different, for the sake of marketing terms, call them avatars, but a few different groups of people, but it doesn't feel disconnected. Like it all feels really connected to me. Like I enjoy the posts that are clearly not made for someone like me who's maybe a little bit further along in my wine journey. I enjoy them just as much as those that are, and sometimes more. Like I sometimes enjoy those posts and those just the content that is clearly made for somebody who's maybe kind of like just starting out on their wine journey and they're just looking for information. I just find that it's so friendly. You talk to people in a way that's really it doesn't dumb it down. It's accessible, but it's also not like infantilizing.
Yeah, there was a conversation I got involved in on LinkedIn recently that was about the kind of, I think, mistaken idea that wine needs to be simplified in order to reach a broader audience. And the conclusion of the writer, and I 100% agree with this, is that it doesn't need to be simplified. Its complexities need to be made interesting and relatable. And so I think you can explain something clearly without oversimplifying it or dumbing it down. And I feel like that's one of the things that we really do try to do in everything that we write, whether that is a social media post or whether that's a blog or whether that's one of our newsletters or whether that's information on our website. I mean, these are all different formats for getting it to people. But I do think that sometimes people have this negative association with education as though they're being lectured to, or it's very kind of dry. I would argue that that's not good education at that point. People naturally want to know why things work the way that they do. And I find this business fascinating. I find the different pieces of it. I find the the biological grape growing pieces fascinating. I find the geology and soil science pieces fascinating. I find the chemistry and winemaking pieces fascinating. I find the business marketing pieces fascinating. So if I'm doing a good job, then I'm communicating why I find this fascinating. And I'm lucky that I get to work on something that I think has that degree of variety and that degree of interconnection to everything from science to culture to history to business. And like I feel like I'm only doing my job if I am able to communicate some of what makes this exciting to me.
I agree. I feel like wine is this I was diagnosed with ADHD a couple years ago, and I find that wine has been the thing that I've stuck with consistently because there's so many things that make it different and interesting every single day. Like I could just like choose my own adventure every single day of the thing that I want to focus on and like get really nerdy about. And it's fun and interesting all the time. Whereas like there are other industries where you're like, you just do the same thing every single day forever and you're okay. Like that's cool. Like that's great for you. I love that for you. But is not for me. So I feel like wine is perfect for people with ADHD because because you have this science aspect of it, but then you can also go the business route and the marketing route, and you can do all these the creative, artistic side, and or you can like drill down and get like super nerdy and do all the like the chemistry and the biology and all the things. It's really it's a dream of an industry to be in for someone who has a brain like mine. I do want to kind of talk a little bit about the Instagram live series that you've been doing. So that started in COVID during the lockdown when we were forced to be inside, and a lot of wineries moved online. And what I really love about you guys is that you carried it on beyond the pandemic. When everyone was coming back out into the tasting room and coming back out into the world, you still, you did that, but then you also stuck with these like the virtual tastings and the Instagram live. So, what made you stick with them?
Well, I should go back to sort of the motivation of starting it in the first place, which was that we realized that all of the ways that we were used to talking to our customers had changed almost overnight. The tasting room was closed. People were at home. We weren't doing festivals. We weren't hosting wine dinners. They weren't hearing about wine at restaurants. And we were getting lots of questions about, like, what are you guys going to do? Like, are you still able to make wine? Are you still able to conduct your business? Like, will we be able to get wine from you? And so I had not really spent much time on camera before the pandemic. But as the pandemic was approaching and I felt it approaching, started doing these quick little like 5-minute video updates of here's what's going on at Tablas Creek. Here's what we understand. Here's what's changing. And I recorded probably 3 of those in the week leading up to that mid-March point where everything was shut down and everybody was sent home. And then once the pandemic, like once we were in that and it was pretty clear that like we were going to be able to continue to make wine, that agriculture was considered an essential industry, but B, that the places in which we were normally able to talk about our wine had largely vanished. I thought that it would be a really valuable thing to do these conversations with different members of my team and have them each talk about what was going on in their departments. So that was
Right.
the beginning of this Instagram Live, was not inviting guests from off of Tablas Creek. It was talking to Neil, talking to Chelsea, talking to Nathan, talking to John, talking to the key people here at Tablas Creek and having them share their worlds.
Yeah.
Of course, you run out of people pretty quickly when you're just talking to your own team. And we were doing these every week. And at the beginning, I was worried that even every week wasn't going to be enough, but we were doing it once a week. So after a couple of months, it was Ian's suggestion. He said, well, why don't you reach out to some of the writers who have interviewed you in the past, and you can turn the tables on them and give them a chance to talk about what they've been working on. My first guest was Elizabeth Schneider of the Wine for Normal People podcast, who had just published a book. My second guest was Patrick Comiskey, who had also just published a book. And I was like, okay, I'm going to give these authors a chance to talk about the book and their work. And that turned out to be like truly fascinating, that I was able to do something which was intentionally and totally not promotional of Tablas Creek, but just a chance to give people who I thought were doing cool stuff in the world of wine a chance to tell their stories. And the fact that they were telling their stories on the Tablas Creek channel, like that was great. That brought more eyes to what we were doing. But the value in it turned out not to be particularly the number of eyes who saw a particular post or a particular broadcast, but in the deeper relationships that I was able to build with these really cool people in the world of wine. And we expanded out, started with mostly writers, but expanded out to winemakers, to people working in the associations that helped promote wine, in the groups, the intersections of wine and the environment, eventually to chefs and somms. And I thought, if you'd asked me at the beginning how long this was going to last, well, first of all, I thought that the lockdowns and the pandemic was only going to last like 6 weeks. So like we would have flown through that pretty quick. And then I would have thought, oh, we'll probably run out of people to invite, people who will say yes to my invitation in, I don't know, 6 months, maybe. We did cut down the frequency from every week to every other week once the lockdowns ended and we were back at work. And there was everybody was not quite so online in front of their computers. And it just takes a while to organize those and do them well. And every 2 weeks was sort of a cadence that I could keep up with. But I started to realize that maybe this had legs when I realized that some of the people who I was inviting, who I thought were these total long shots, like they said yes right away, and they seemed super excited to be asked. Like I'm thinking of like the Elaine Chacon Brown and Jancis Robinson event. Like I invited Jancis thinking that was like a total moonshot, and she replied in 20 minutes saying, "Oh, I'd love to. That sounds great." Like it was so realizing that this was maybe an opportunity that needed somebody to step into it and fill it, and realizing that I enjoyed the process of researching and writing questions and talking to people on camera. Like I don't think anything lasts unless you enjoy doing it. Same thing with like writing on the blog. It's not something for every winery. It's not something for every winemaker. Like you have to enjoy the process. This Instagram Live thing is one of those things that I really enjoy. I never would have thought that it would have lasted this long. I think I'm at 110 conversations at this point, and it's now one of the pieces of my job that I look forward to most. So I've carved out a space to make it continue to work, but it's grown way beyond what I ever thought it would be at the beginning.
Yeah. Oh gosh, I love it so much. And you're exactly right. I have sort of this internal philosophy with my business that if it's not fun, it's not worth doing. And so all the things that I do, the podcast, the Substack, all those things, I really genuinely enjoy doing them. And so that's why they continue, and yeah, so I really appreciate that. And I think that's kind of the key to a sustainable anything, but sustainable marketing, especially on social media, where there's so many people who just don't like doing social media. And I'm like, okay, well, is there something you feel like you have to do this thing and you're obligated to do it? You're not going to like it, and then you're going to be bad at it, and then you're going to hate it even more. Is there something that we can find within that you do enjoy doing so that it's sustainable, and so that people can tell when you like doing something, and so they respond to that and they reward you for that, and it makes it easier to continue to do the thing. So yeah. I think that's just a huge thing, is that you gotta enjoy what you do, or else
Yeah,
what's the point?
I think your advice is really smart. I mean, find the aspect that works for you, because not everybody, you don't have to do everything.
Yeah,
But
exactly.
you have to do something.
You gotta do something.
And the something is going to be a lot more sustainable if it's something that you enjoy.
Exactly. Yes. I'm going to kind of take us a little bit left of this conversation and talk a little bit about the premium boxed wine that you are doing at Tablas Creek, which I think is so much fun and so cool. It's just right along those lines of you doing these really innovative things for a small wine brand to do bag and box wine and all that. And make it like premium wine. So my question for you is a kind of multi-part question, is like, what inspired that to do that in the first place? But then did you get any like pushback from it from your customers?
Okay, so what inspired it in the first place, there's sort of two pieces of it. One was that I did in late 2020, I did an internal audit, a greenhouse gas audit, so a carbon footprint of Tablas Creek based on some metrics that were published by the California Sustainable Wine Growing Alliance. And basically went through all the things we were doing in the vineyard and the winery, power generation, we're 100% solar powered, and in our packaging, because anybody who has done any sort of a deep dive like this into wine realizes pretty quickly that packaging is the lion's share of your carbon footprint. Particularly the glass bottle is huge. So I did this, and I mostly did it with the intent of evaluating the impact of moving to lightweight glass back 15 years ago now. And there was this useful graph that the California Sustainable Wine Growing Alliance had published showing the relative carbon footprints of like heavy glass bottle, regular glass bottle, lightweight glass bottle. And it was essentially like 10% savings of your total carbon footprint by moving from regular glass to lightweight glass. And there was a fourth bar on that chart, which was 3-liter bag-in-box, which showed essentially a 60% savings in your carbon footprint if you moved to that. I never really took that as a serious option because of the idea that like bag-in-box is essentially for like bottom shelf grocery store kinds of wines and probably tops out around $35 retail, which is the equivalent of like $9 a bottle. And our least expensive wine at the time was a $28 bottle of wine. I'm not going to sell 4 bottles of that for anything close to that price. And so I mostly didn't want to remake the graph. So I just put it in there with the bag-in-box and dismissed it with this sort of one-word sentence saying, obviously, like the best package in terms of carbon footprint is the bag-in-box, but I don't see that as likely for Tablas Creek, given its current positioning. And this blog got more shares and posts and comments than anything I had done in years. It was sort of the right level of self-analysis at the right time for an industry that was really looking at this in a year where anybody who lived through California in 2020, like it was incredibly conscious of the impacts of climate change, of the necessity as a winery or really anybody in agriculture to be trying to be more conscious of this. And one of the places I posted this was just on my personal Facebook page. And I got a comment from a friend saying, "Hey, Jason, how do you expect the consumer perception of boxed wine to change if a winery like Tablas Creek isn't willing to take a crack at changing it?"
Yeah.
And I thought about that. And I came to the conclusion that he was right. And I talked with my team, Chelsea and Neil particularly, and Ian, of course, because there's a huge marketing aspect of this. And everybody on my team was on board to say, okay, let's figure this out. Like if we can do something and be the first, we've been the first at a lot of stuff. And there's real advantages to being the first to do something within a sphere. You get a lot of attention for it. Of course, you're also working without a net. So you don't have the advantage of other people having tried this and you being able to learn from their mistakes. But we decided to try it. We priced it at the price that the wine justified. So the original price for that 3-liter box was $95. We rented a little box filling machine. We reached out to a couple of wineries who had done this and they gave us some useful advice. I particularly want to shout out the Glabs at Rhyme Cellars, who were incredibly helpful in this. They had done a small box run of their Vermentino before us. But we did it. We made 324 boxes the first year of our rosé. I wrote a blog about, I think the title was Why We Think the Time is Right for a $95 Box of Wine. And that also got 30, 40 comments and like hundreds of shares and all kinds of attention. And I was like, maybe we're onto something. Maybe we'll get really lucky and sell out of this box in a week. Because like that would be a big story if we sold out of these boxes in a week. I thought realistically it was probably going to be a month. We announced the release and sold out in 4 hours. And I got to spend the next week responding to disappointed wine club members who were like, I wasn't at my computer. I missed it. Like,
Oh, no.
I can't believe you guys are out. But like, if you want like immediate validation for a proof of concept, like that was it. So we did a second batch of the rosé because we were like, clearly there's demand here.
Yeah.
And then did a batch of Catalan white and a batch of Catalan red later in the year. And all of those sold well. We got press in cool places like Rob Report and Forbes and like not just wine things, sort of luxury lifestyle business sorts of things. And we were off. And it has been a real bright spot in the last couple of years. We doubled the production. The next year, so this was 2021 vintage. So 2022 was the first year that we bottled these. We doubled it in 2023. We doubled it again in 2024. And it's continued to sell fast. It's continued to, I feel like, offer us an opportunity to have the kinds of conversations that we want to have. Talking about sustainability, talking about people reconsidering maybe a prejudice that they have against a package. I guess in general, it's not the package's fault that the wine that was mostly in it wasn't very good. It was the price point. So it's been a super cool thing, and it's continued to expand. And we've been psyched to see other people following our leads because I think it's great.
Yeah. Oh, it's so cool. I was so excited when Ian reached out to me about it and was like, hey, we need you to photograph this. And I was like, okay, yes, I will do that. It's so cool. And the wine's so good. And I will always have a special place in my heart for bag-in-box wine because I did start my wine journey drinking Franzia. And that was the thing that got me to be like, maybe I can try better wine. And, when I have more money, I'll get more, nicer wine. And it was just like a nice stepping stone for me and it was accessible and all these things. Have you felt like with the bag-in-box, the premium bag-in-box, do you feel like you're getting more kind of like entry-level people, or do you feel like the price point is kind of keeping you with the same group of folks who would normally be buying your wine in bottles?
I would say because we have really only found this to be successful in the direct-to-consumer sphere, we have tried it in wholesale and it's struggled, that because it's been successful in the direct-to-consumer sphere, it's basically our existing audience.
Yeah.
And I know that means a lot of people who maybe have never bought a box of wine before. I've heard from dozens of people who've told me that. The Tablas Creek wine in a box is so great, I'd never bought a box before. So I think it's we're educating our existing audience rather than bringing in a new audience, except for the fact that there are a lot of people who are in the industry who are regular buyers of our boxes, who were sort of following what we did, but I think have used it as kind of a nudge in their own world to get their own companies or their own circle of friends to reconsider a package. Everybody loves an underdog. So
yeah.
I feel like this is a case where like we're helping promote an underdog package type.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I feel like we saw a similar thing with the rise of screw caps where, there was a lot of prejudice against screw caps because it was associated with cheap wine, is associated with Behringer, and for whatever reason, corks and then heavy glass were associated with elite, expensive, premium wine. And we know that that's not always the case. There's heavy bottles of not very great wine that the only thing that's expensive about this wine is the glass. So,
Right,
yeah, exactly. Yeah, they're like, we're totally premium, we promise. Totally believe us, wink, wink. Yeah, and so I appreciate that. I appreciate that you took this package that you hadn't considered, but you were kind of just like, oh, yes, it's the best, it's the most like carbon conscious, lowest carbon footprint packaging that we can find right now. But we can't touch that because
right,
it's it can't be us. Yeah. And I appreciate your friend reaching out to you and being like, hey, but how do you expect that to change if you don't change it. It's kind of helping us sort of examine our own internal prejudices about, in certain things. You know, in
Totally.
the wine industry, we can be so snobby about really specific things that are very arbitrary. And so it's cool to see you changing your mind on that and then helping other people change their mind on it too. And I wonder also if by your regular consumers purchasing this, if they've introduced your wine to people who maybe otherwise wouldn't have tried it because they had this in their fridge or in, at
I'm
their home.
sure that's happened because again, it's of a size that it's not something you finish in a single setting. It's
Yeah.
something that you have in your fridge for a few weeks, or you bring it to a party and you share it with people there. And so I'm sure that that does happen. I realized I
Yeah.
didn't answer part of your question, which was, did we have resistance to it?
Right. Yeah.
And I would say, I mean, we had, when we announced it, there were a few people who, in the same kind of reactionary way that you get whenever you try something new, they say, "Oh, I will never buy it. It's only terrible wines that happen in it. This means that your wine must be terrible. I'm never buying a bottle of Tablas Creek." I don't think these were Tablas Creek customers anyway. These are people with a particular axe to grind. But the more legitimate critiques that we got were people who are genuinely worried about the proliferation of plastic.
Right.
One of the one of the nice things about a traditional wine bottle package is that it's made from glass, which is this infinitely recyclable natural product, and cork, which is a natural product from a renewable resource. And then if you're packaging in bag-in-box, you have cardboard, which is recyclable, and then inside of that you have this flexible food grade plastic insert. And I mean, we have made like really conscious efforts to try to eliminate plastic from our operations, from what we do in the vineyard, from what we do in the winery to what we do here in the office. And so I'm very sensitive to that critique. Like, what are you doing? You're backtracking from this environmental stance that you've made. And the reality is that until we have a circular economy for glass where glass can be reused, or until we have a much better recycling economy in the United States, that the illusion of the glass bottle being this great sustainable renewable resource is a long way away from reality. Only about 30% of the glass that's used in the United States gets recycled. And a big
Right.
chunk of that doesn't get melted down and used to make new glass. It gets crushed up and used as a part of road base. So the reality is that the vast majority of glass containers are made from virgin glass, which requires mining, melting, molding, transport, cushioning, like all of this stuff that people don't see when they see this like beautiful glass package. So what you're essentially doing when you move from a glass, like 4 glass bottles into one bag-in-box is that you're trading something like 4 pounds of glass plus the capsules, corks, labels, all of that, and then the cardboard packaging that supports that, to about 4 ounces of plastic and a lesser amount of cardboard around the outside of that. It's still a single-use package. That's not ideal. It's still creating some plastic, which I don't like. But you have in wine at the moment, you have a choice of alternatives, none of which are great, with the exception of something like a reusable stainless steel keg, which we also do for restaurants and wine bars, because that's a zero waste package, and I think that that's amazing. But even that, you've got to mine the ore to make your steel. You've got to produce it, then you have to transport it around, and so we're left with imperfect options. And
Yeah.
I think that moving the products that are meant to be enjoyed in the first 6 to 12 months into a package that is lighter in terms of the carbon footprint, it's the best of the alternatives that we have.
Yeah. 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 I appreciate that you've done that research and that you're really thinking about like, okay, like I am conscious of this and it's a bummer. Yeah. Like, wish there was a better solution. But this is the best solution that we have right now with the hope that things will get better in the future for glass or other alternative packaging. Have you thought about canning your wine at all?
We've discussed it. We haven't ever gotten very serious about it.
Hmm.
Neil has done some canning for his Lone Madrone. He does the
Hmm.
Hike It little cans. So he's had some experience. I think the packaging they're still working on it.
Yeah.
It does have the advantage that aluminum does get recycled at a higher rate than anything else in our waste stream right now. It's also pretty lightweight, certainly compared to glass. But the lining that goes inside of cans has not proven to be perfect. It does get eaten away at by the acid that's in the wine, and then it starts
Hmm.
interacting with the aluminum, and there are some real negatives to that. I've had some good sparkling wines out of cans. Seems like the carbon dioxide is probably helping preserve it. But so I guess all to say that we have been watching it, but we haven't yet felt like it was ready enough as a package for us to leap in.
Yeah, yeah. That makes a lot of sense to me. I want to just really quick touch on your regenerative organic certification. You were the first regenerative organic certified winery in the world or in the
Yeah,
country? Yeah, in the
yeah,
world,
in the world.
which is very cool. So I wonder if this is going to be like a tough question. I feel like you've sort of answered this question a little bit just in passing, but from a marketing perspective, how do you communicate that in like a meaningful way without it becoming kind of like a buzzword or feeling like greenwashing? Because I feel like when I'm talking about like SIP certifications and sustainable certifications, it feels like the bare minimum with sustainability, like that you kind of like just have to be doing that. And it also feels a little bit like we're just slapping a label on something and being like, okay, we're good. We did the check. We did the green thing. So, yeah.
I think that you highlight one of the reasons why we have never been super comfortable with the sustainability certifications.
Hmm.
Even though the people who are involved in administering them and promoting them, like they are real believers and are genuinely committed to making the wine world a better and more sustainable place. The people who work for these organizations, like they're great. But I do think that in general, the bar has been set too low for most of those sustainability certifications. The fact that Napa Green just made big news last year, the year before, and that they were going to be the first of these sustainability certifications to ban the use of Roundup after a phase out period.
Yeah.
If that's big news, that suggests that maybe the bar should have been higher to start.
Yeah.
So
Agreed.
one of the things that we've been organic since our inception. We've been biodynamic since 2010. One of the things that we really loved about the regenerative organic program when it was explained to us in 2019 when we were called to ask if we would join the pilot program was that it had some of the same breadth as the best of the sustainability certifications in that it was looking at your business practices as well as your farming practices, but it had the
Yeah.
rigor of something like biodynamics where there was not like well, you can use this chemical product as long as you don't do it that often, as long as like there was none of that. Like you had to be organic to start. You had to be working to consciously build your soils, build biodiversity. There were annual audits. It was this rigorous combination of like a great soil health program and like a B Corp kind of sustainability, business
Yeah.
sustainability thing. So that was what appealed to us about it. And I think it makes it relatively easy to talk about it from a marketing perspective because it is both broad and rigorous. And there's so many aspects that you can talk about that people just like it makes sense to them. It makes sense that you should be lighter on your use of shared resources like non-renewable energy and groundwater. A lot of biodynamic farms are very intensive users of water. Like if everybody used that much water, would that truly be sustainable? No, it would not be. But in regenerative organic, you have to be weaning yourself off of groundwater. And I think that, again, that makes sense to people. And it maybe makes sense in a different way than the requirements for farm worker fairness, where you have to pay your farm workers a living wage and you have to make sure that their working conditions are safe. that you've set up these systems where their feedback is solicited and encouraged and acted upon. Like that again makes sense to maybe a different subset of people. And then you have the people for whom it's all about soil health and reduction in tillage and eliminate bare ground and make sure that your land is always photosynthesized. Like, again, that also makes sense. And the thing that we loved about regenerative organic is that it included all of it. It was not like, oh, you do this, but then probably to talk about your energy use, you should get this audit. To talk about your friendliness to the local wildlife, you should get this audit. And to, like, it wasn't like you had this piecemeal approach. It was all the stuff we cared about in a single package.
Mm-hmm.
So we continue to talk about it. It's not, and I think that this is something which is maybe a useful lesson, almost no matter what it is that you're trying to talk about in your business. So that don't assume that people, if you've talked about it once, everybody has read it and understood it, and it's time to move on to something else. There's always multiple aspects, different ways of diving into it, and keep talking about it, but talk about it from different approaches and talk about why it matters to the different choices that you're making. And I think that's the approach that we try to take. And I'm incredibly fortunate that we have such a passionate and committed team here who wants to talk about this stuff. So it doesn't always need to be me. It's Neil, or it's Chelsea, or it's Nathan, or it's Jordy, or it's Austin, or it's Ian, or it's like, even from a business perspective, it's John or Charlie in our tasting room. It's people who see how this matters to the things that they care about and find an aspect of that that resonates and then can talk about it. And I think that's that regenerative organic is maybe particularly good at that because of how many pieces of our business and of life it touches. But I think the lesson is more generally.
Do you feel like getting that regenerative organic certification has sort of shifted your audience a little bit and your community? Or do you feel like, again, it was another situation where it was like these people that have already believe in what you're doing and all these things were just like, yeah, like, great, let's keep doing all the good things?
I think there's aspects of both. Certainly, we were already organic and biodynamic. We were already talking about that. We already had our flock of sheep. We were pretty deep into all of this. But I do think that regenerative farming has this resonance outside of the world of wine that maybe biodynamics doesn't. And it also has this, it really has gotten a lot of attention over the last 4 or 5 years, because it is how agriculture becomes a part of the successful fight against things like resource scarcity and climate change. And so there are people who have really embraced the ideals of regenerative farming, who then, when they're looking for a winery to visit or a winery to learn more about, doesn't take a lot of digging into regenerative farming and wine before you get to Tablas Creek. So we've certainly, I think, broadened our audience that way. But I think it's probably even more important that the things that you do give your existing fans a reason to be excited about you and proud of you and talk about what you're doing to their circles. And
Yeah.
that's one of the things that we really love about this, is that it is something that makes people feel good about their decision to patronize Tablas Creek. The more we can make people feel good about that, the better.
That's so beautiful. Gosh, I feel like I have so many things. I could just keep talking to you all day long. I'm going to ask you one last question. For wineries listening to this who maybe don't have the same resources or audience that Tablas Creek has now that you've built up all these amazing programs and things, what's one thing you'd suggest they focus on first if they want to build more meaningful, long-term, and sustainable engagement in their marketing?
Oof. I would say it's something that we talked about at the beginning, which is kind of let people in. Let people inside the things that you care about, you worry about. Like, this is true in personal relationships as well as in business relationships, but like, show your vulnerability, show the things that turn you on, and show the things that keep you up at night. And it doesn't mean you have to share everything that's going on in your world, but like, people are going to connect to the things that feel real to them. And the more you can make sure that what you're communicating through whatever your channels are, through your social media, through your newsletter, through your website, the more that you can have those be the real things that matter to you, I think the more effective they're going to be.
What a great answer. I love it. That's what I would say too. Yeah. It's just yeah, be transparent and all that within reason. I mean, I know there's certain things that maybe we're not ready to open up about yet, but maybe eventually once we're a little further away from the trauma of whatever's going on or the excitement, then we can approach these conversations with a little bit more clarity. Yeah, and all that. So I really appreciate that.
I have a funny example of that.
Yes.
Probably 15 years ago, this was at the height of like wine competition mania. I think I had gotten like 8 solicitations for different wine competitions in a month. And there was like wine competition. It was like the women's wine competition and the Pacific Rim wine competition and the Central Coast wine competition and the all Rhone varieties wine competition. It was like one after another. And I wrote a blog basically diving into some of the research that showed that results in wine competitions were essentially non-repeatable. Like that people on panels like that, other than identifying obviously flawed wines, could not, like, you tasted the same wines on them multiple times, they did not repeat their results. So other than selecting out things that were flawed, like they didn't mean much. And the number of medals that you got was just a question of like how many competitions you entered.
Yeah.
And I wrote this and showed it to Tommy Oldry, who was our national sales manager at the time, as well as still super close friend. And he said, "So Jason, I bet this felt really good to write, but you're not going to publish this, right?" And I was like, "But it's really, it's good. It's right." He's like, "Yeah, but like think of all of the people who like care about what they're doing and matter to Tablas Creek and believe strongly in this, who you have just dismissed like in 8 paragraphs."
Yeah.
I'm like, "Oh." So I showed it to my dad and he's like, "Yeah, nice piece. We're not publishing this."
Yeah.
So,
Oh.
I mean, that I still will go back and read it from time to time. I still have it as a draft on the blog.
Yeah.
But like, apropos of transparency, like, yes, you talk about the things that are meaningful, but that does
Mhm.
not mean that everything is an appropriate thing for you to be talking about as you winery person. And
Yeah.
you have to have people who you trust, who can tell you when maybe you've wandered across that line. But when in doubt, I do think that erring on the side of just being authentically who you are is going to serve you.
Yeah. Oh, what a beautiful place to stop. I love that. I love to end our conversation on that because that is yeah, that's I think what it all comes down to is just being authentically you. And so, Jason, thank you so much for your time. And as I said before, I could just talk to you forever. And I feel like every time I run into you, I'm like, God, I wish I had more time to just sit and chat with you about life and all the things. What is the best place for people to reach you if they want to follow you and Tablas Creek and all the things that you're doing?
We are at Tablas Creek on all of the social channels. I have, as Twitter has descended from being at one point my favorite of all of the social networks to now someplace that like I can barely stand to open up the app. I have found that at least personally, the things that I am kind of working through often show up on LinkedIn first.
Mm-hmm.
So I don't post a lot of wine or business related stuff on my personal social media except for LinkedIn. So at Tablas Creek there, and then I'm just Jason Haas on LinkedIn. And then I do want to encourage people, if they're interested, to follow our blog, because we do an email subscription, or you can subscribe via RSS if that's the way you roll. But that's the deep dive into, again, the things that are keeping me up at night and the things that I think are super exciting.
I'll put all that information in the show notes. Thank you all for tuning in to another episode. Please, if you like the show, rate and review it wherever you're listening, or if you're watching on YouTube, please subscribe. It really, really helps get the good word out and lets us talk to more cool people like Jason. Thank you so much. You have a wonderful rest of your day.
Thanks, Heather. You too.
Bye.